Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask to be you just recognized me. I'd ask to call up Bennet Title I, Amendment 1 on comparability.
So ordered.
And, Mr. Chairman, at the end, I certainly don't believe that the federal government should be a national school board either, but I do think this bill is fundamentally at its heart a civil rights bill. And one of the enduring truths of being a human being is that we don't get to pick our parents. We don't get to pick whether we live in an affluent household or we live in a household that's below the poverty line. That's a matter of good or bad luck. And unfortunately, too often, that luck determines educational outcomes for people in this country. If you are unlucky enough to be born poor in the United States this year, you come to kindergarten having heard 30 million fewer words than somebody born into a more affluent household. If you're unlucky enough to be born poor in this country, the likelihood of your attending a school that any senator on this committee would be proud to send their own son and daughter is virtually zero. And the place it all ends is with a graduation rate from college that's roughly 9 out of 100 for people who start out in poverty. These are savage outcomes in our country, especially when we now know that enough of our public school children in the United States are so poor that more than half of them qualify for free and reduced lunch. This isn't about a subset of students in our schools. This is about the majority of our students in our schools and what 15 years of a ravaging economy has done to the middle class and people who'd like to get into the middle class. The purpose of Title I, which is part of this bill, is to give disadvantaged students some help by providing the schools they attend with additional incremental resources. It's not actually a lot per student or per school, but Title I money is supposed to be supplemental. It's supposed to be in addition to what state and local resources are, and to achieve this goal, the law requires districts to provide comparable state and local resources to their Title I and non-Title I schools, comparable. Except incredibly, from the beginning, Title I has defeated its own purpose by requiring districts to exclude the largest expenditure, actual teacher, principal, and other educator salaries from the calculation of comparability. That, in many districts, as everybody around this table knows, more experienced teachers with their higher salaries and with their higher pensions cluster in more affluent schools, while less experienced teachers with their lower salaries tend to teach in the higher poverty schools. That means that if this is more affluent school and I'm paying my teachers up here, the district is charging me the average teacher's salary for this higher salary. If I'm teaching in a high poverty school and my salaries are down here, I'm being charged not this low salary, but the average salary. And it's not the school that's being charged, it's our children, to be clear. So there is a massive subsidy running from the poorer kids in the United States to the more affluent kids. That's the effect of this federal so-called civil rights law. As a result, that means schools with high concentrations of low-income students often get less state and local resources than schools with lower concentrations of such students. That makes it impossible by definition for Title I dollars to supplement. And it is a myth that we're providing additional resources to kids in schools with high concentrations of poverty. In fact, partly because of this failure, we are only one of 3 countries in the OECD who actually spend more money on affluent kids than we do on kids living in poverty. And there isn't anybody in this room who's not concerned about closing the achievement gap, and I would suggest that that is exactly the opposite of the way we'd want to spend the money if we were going to close the achievement gap. The federal government is actually subsidizing districts and states' efforts to spend more money in low-poverty schools. This is a practice for the convenience of adults, not for the benefit of children. We created it, and we can fix it. This amendment would close that loophole. This provision does not require districts to force teachers to transfer to certain schools. It simply asks districts to more equitably allocate its state and local resources in whatever manner they deem appropriate. And I will say, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member, I am profoundly grateful that included in this base bill is a requirement for the first time that districts and schools report based on actual teacher salaries, not based on average teacher salaries. That will at least give us the data we need, I hope, to come back and close this loophole. With that, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for going on at some length. I thank you very much for the opportunity to offer the amendment and to have a vote on the amendment as well.